Leslie.
Anti-Muslim hate.
Apprehend those responsible for this abhorrent crime?
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's about how resources are spent, and that's particularly relevant in pertinent to the question of West Yorkshire, because I can't recall the figure off the top of my head, but I do seem to recall West Yorkshire has some several millions pounds worth of reserves in savings. Of course, how that money is spent is a matter for the elected Police and Crime Commissioner, and I very much hope he will be taking up the Home Office's funding settlement suggestion of increasing council tax to ensure that they have more money to deal with the resourcing issue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've been approached by many in my constituency who are apprehended. Can she reassure my constituents that they will feel the full weight of the law?
Minister. Mr. Speaker, I mustn't, can't go into more detail on the specifics of the ongoing police investigation, because she will not want me or anyone else to inadvertently endanger any future prosecution. But I can give her the reassurance that this case is being investigated very, very carefully, and that the full force of the law is being applied.
Karen Buck.
Anti-Semitic and Islamic hate crime is on the rise, is well documented, but we also know there is significant under-reporting, and in my experience, often by women. Hijab-wearing Muslim women are often most vulnerable because of their visibility. What assurances can the Minister give me that, in terms of reaching women in the communities, and my friend has said not just in mosques, that the government is doing what it can to ensure the message of reporting all of hate crime incidents is got out into the community?
The Honourable Lady has hit upon a very important point. We must all do what we can to encourage victims of hate crime, whether it's to do with race or religion or disability or gender identity and so on. We must please encourage people to report it, because we know that under-reporting is a real issue. We know also that the work of organisations like Tell Mama, I hope, will help people find the wherewithal to report those incidents to the police so they can be dealt with.
Speaker, I welcome that we are all united in
condemning this despicable attempt to divide our community. Since 2016, national rhetoric and language has led to a big increase in hate crime. Will the government lead by example and encourage everybody to tone down national language and rhetoric?
Minister.
Yes.
Stevens.
The Minister referred several times to the £2.4 million funding under the government's anti-hate scheme. She also referred to just 45 places of worship receiving funding. Are there any plans to increase the amount of funding and the number of places of worship that will attract that funding this year?
May I write to the Honourable Lady, because I'm not... I'm unclear as to whether, I'll confess, whether applications are in tune, and I wouldn't wish to in any way inadvertently answer incorrectly. So I'll write to the Honourable Lady if I'm...
Jim McMahon.
Speaker, the best way to build belonging, tolerance and relationships is to invest in opportunities for people to come together and learn that understanding. Now in Oldham, who do this I think pretty well, they were completely undermined by the government snatching away the area-based grant in 2010 with no assessment made as to what impact that was going to have on local cohesion within communities. Will the government take seriously the need to invest at a community level in bringing people together?
Minister.
Well, of course we recognise the importance of bringing communities together, and there are many, many ways in which to do that. The way in which my constituency may enjoy being brought together may be very different from another constituency elsewhere in the country. I'm not quite clear as to the direct impact the Honourable Gentleman asserts in relation to that project, but I will happily write to him about it. Thank you.
Jane Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's been reported, first of all, can I condemn this letter along with everybody else? It's absolutely abhorrent. It's been reported that there's been a spike in hate crime since the EU referendum, both in Islamophobia and in anti-Semitism, coming from the hard right and the hard left. It's also reported by the CPS that there's been a drop in the number of prosecutions in 2016-17 by over 1,000 against this increase in incidents. What is the Minister doing with the CPS and the police to ensure that that is reversed?
Well, we know that there has been a drop in referrals recorded last year, which has had an impact on the number of completed prosecutions in 2016 and 17, and the CPS is working with the police at a local and national level to understand the reasons for the overall fall in referrals in the past 2 years. But again, the message is, please, to spread around our constituencies, if you have been the victim of hate crime, please report it, because that way we can try and do something about it.
Vinnie Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Those police forces like Greater Manchester, which have long targeted hate crime and work hard with CST on anti-Semitism, with the Muslim community on Islamophobia, nevertheless recognise that community policing is central to challenging hate crime. Now, will the Minister take that message back? Because, frankly, the community policing is about trust, and trust is fundamental. We need our community police.
Minister.
Well, I'm grateful to the Honourable Gentleman. Of course, local policing is important, but we also have to recognise that we can't just rely on policing alone to reach into communities, and not just to reach into, but build relationships. And this is why organisations like Tal Mama and other charities are such an important part of the overall picture of ensuring that people, when they feel they've been the victims of crime, they know what to do, they know where to go, and they feel that they will be listened to, and their experiences will be acted upon.
Delmore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's quite clear the whole House condemns these cowards for sending this letter, but it isn't just those who sent the letters causing this hate, and not just groups like Britain First. It includes groups like the BNP. And my honourable friend, the member for Bridgend, and I received a letter just at the end of last month from the BNP with a poem making racist comments, and on the back of the letter it says, "Rebecca will be an ethnic minority group as she grows unless you take action today." Would the Minister condemn the actions of the BNP and say that there should be no place in British society of political parties who peddle this hate?
I'm absolutely clear that the British National Party and all the other far-right organisations that have been described today have no place in our society. And frankly, they're showing at the ballot boxes when they dare to stand for election shows how little truck the British public have with them.
Thank you. Order. Urgent question. Caroline Lucas.
Speaker, to ask the Leader of the House about the treatment of House of Commons staff.
The Leader of the House.
Andrea Leadsom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady for her question. She and I worked together on the cross-party working group on an independent complaints and grievance policy, and I thank her sincerely for her work on it. Reports of bullying of House staff are of huge concern to me and to honourable members right across the House. I'm committed to stamping out all kinds of bullying and harassment in Parliament in order to create an environment in which everyone feels safe and is treated with the respect and dignity that they deserve. We can only achieve our goals in this House with the support of others. A great debt of gratitude is owed by us all to the House staff who support us behind the scenes. I myself have worked with a large number of civil servants and staff of the House during my time in Parliament, from the clerks of the Treasury Select Committee to my private offices at the Treasury, in Energy and DEFRA, and now to the team in the Leader's Office and the excellent secretariat that supported the working group. I have always been impressed, and I'm very grateful for the dedication, professionalism, high standards and courtesy that all the civil servants and House staff have shown. I know that many honourable and right honourable members across the House and in the other place would say the same. The House will be aware that significant progress has been made in recent months following the shocking reports at the end of last year of sexual harassment, bullying and intimidation in this place. The working group that I chaired, set up by the Prime Minister, has now published its report and it has been agreed by both Houses. The work streams are now in place to get the new independent complaints procedure up and running within the next 3 months. The Honourable Lady will recall that the working group wanted House staff to be included in the new complaints procedure from day one. However, following evidence taken and in consultation with the trade union representatives of House staff, it was agreed that the staff of the House would not immediately be covered by the new independent procedure because they were already covered by the House's own respect policy. It was believed that the respect policy was working well and that House staff were satisfied with it. However, it was acknowledged during the working group evidence sessions that the respect policy did not cover complaints of sexual harassment and violence, and the aspiration of the working group is to take up the question of whether House staff should have immediate access to the new independent complaints procedure now that the report has been agreed by both Houses. And following the Newsnight allegations and others, it is clear that the respect policy may not be sufficient to protect House staff. I'm aware that today the Clerk of the House of Commons has written to House staff saying that there are clearly unresolved issues over bullying and harassment, including sexual harassment, which need to be addressed, and this will include a review of the respect policy. The Clerk of the House of Commons has also reassured staff who wish to come forward with complaints of bullying that they will be dealt with in the proper manner with the support of their managers and colleagues. It is right that everyone working for or with Parliament, regardless of position or seniority, should have the same rights and protections and should be held to the same high standards. The House Commission next meets on Monday the 19th of March, next Monday, and I have given notice to my fellow members that I will be recommending a short, independently led inquiry by the House Commission looking into allegations of systemic bullying of parliamentary staff. I will propose that the inquiry should hear from past and current staff members about their experiences and help to provide them with closure wherever possible. I will also propose that it should take soundings from current and former House staff on whether the respect policy is fit for purpose and whether House staff would be better served by having access to the new independent complaints and grievance policy from day one. Mr. Speaker, I am more determined than ever that we banish all kinds of harassment and bullying from this place, because make no mistake, there is a need for change.
Caroline Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for granting this urgent cross-party question. This isn't about party politics and it's not about political gain. It's about doing the right thing by the staff who support us on a daily basis and ensuring that the House of Commons leads by example when it comes to robustly tackling workplace bullying and sexual misconduct. Members and the public will have been shocked by the revelations of bullying at Westminster that were highlighted by Newsnight last week. I commend the Leader of the House for her ongoing work to establish an independent complaints and grievance procedure, and the need for that arose in part because the 2014 Respect policy did not apply to large numbers of those working in Parliament. There are now considerable grounds to assert that that same Respect policy does not have the confidence of the staff it is intended to protect, and that the new independent procedure must immediately be expanded to avoid a two-tier system. So I'm grateful to the Leader of the House that she broadly agrees with that, and I'm pleased to hear about a new short inquiry. But will she also confirm very specifically that there will be a presumption in favour of historic allegations being thoroughly investigated should those affected choose to make formal complaints, either under the Respect policy or the new procedure? Will she acknowledge that the positive work that she has led to date risks being undermined if we continue to allow sanctions to be determined by a committee on which MPs effectively hold all the power? Will she agree that the whole process, including sanctions, must be handled by an independent body? Will she revisit whether good employer and consent training as an important part of culture change should start before the next election? I think the evidence is clear that it should. And in the meantime, can she assure staff that any further complaints will be treated with the seriousness and respect which they deserve and will not be dismissed, as they were last Friday, as grotesque exaggeration?
The Leader of the House.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I've already mentioned, I certainly agree with the Honourable Lady, and it was the aspiration of the working group to cover all staff working here in Parliament, including staff of the House, in our independent complaints procedure from day one. And I share her concern that we should now take steps to ensure that that does become the case as soon as that independent policy is up and running, which we intend to be within 3 months from now. With regards to her point about historic allegations, again, she will recall that the working group made clear we will deal with historic allegations, and it'll be a matter for the detailed policies and procedures of the new working group to establish how exactly that can be done. I think what the Clerk of the House of Commons has made clear today is that he will be looking to provide that reassurance to House staff that any historic allegations will be properly dealt with in the future. She mentioned sanctions, that those must be independent. That has been a core part of the work of the working group. We are now looking very carefully and closely at how that impacts on the work of the Independent Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards and the Standards Committee itself, where there are both parliamentary members and lay members, and that work is ongoing. And in fact, later today, I'm looking forward to meeting with the Standards Committee to have exactly the start of those discussions. She mentions consent training. Again, in the working group, we were very clear that consent training should be something that all people, not only who employ staff in this place, but who come into contact with other people, should be very clear about what constitutes consent and precisely what doesn't. And I can assure the Honourable Lady, I'm very keen to provide the carrot that ensures people want to take up that training. But as we agreed in the working group, we didn't have the levers at that time to make it compulsory. And then finally, I totally share her desire to see all staff here treated with the dignity and respect that everybody in this place deserves.
Mark Harper.
Grateful, Mr. Speaker. Can I welcome what the Leader of the House said about her short inquiry? It seems to me that a good test for her to adopt is to make sure that this House does what all organisations should do, which is to make sure that everybody that works here, whether they work for members of Parliament or they work for the House, have the same processes and can expect to be treated to the same high standards, whoever they work for. And I urge her to bring that measure in as soon as she possibly can.
Leader of the House.
Well, I completely agree with my right honourable friend, and I can assure him and all honourable members that that is the aspiration of the working group, and it is my personal goal.
Valerie Vaz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it is noted that you actually have granted the urgent question, even though you are one of the people mentioned in media reports. But no one, critics or otherwise, can deny your commitment to accountability and transparency and attempts to move the House forward, recognising diversity and modern customs and practice. Mr. Speaker, the opposition take all allegations seriously, and we want a workplace that accommodates and supports everyone. I don't want to comment on individual cases. It is a matter for House authorities. But I want to ask the Leader of the House, is she aware of any formal complaints that have been instigated on the basis of those cases that have been reported? And if so, when? I note that she has suggested an inquiry. I'm very pleased that we can have this discussion at the Commission, and we look forward to that. Mr. Speaker, some cases predate the respect policy, and I know that as a result of the work streams following the report of the working group into sexual harassment and bullying, that too is being amended, and that there will be a new behaviour code and procedure that covers everyone working on the estate and in our constituencies. It is imperative that all staff working here feel that they can raise any complaints and grievances immediately. Can the Leader of the House confirm that she will agree to the President of the staff side attending the steering group, which I previously requested, and support? The working group published its report on the 8th of February 2018. The steering group is monitoring the work that will be carried out, and I'm pleased that there is now a permanent secretariat. And the further work set out in the report that needs to be done is being progressed to ensure that complaints and grievance policy that will be put into place is fair and robust. It is only when that is tested will we know if they work. There will be a continual process to refine them so that they are effective, so everyone has confidence in them. Can the Leader of the House say, and she has touched on the figure of 3 months, but we need to balance speed with making sure that there is an effective process, whether this work will be completed by the 3 months or at least by summer, at least before the House rises. Mr. Speaker, the opposition Labour Party takes all complaints on sexual harassment and abuse and discrimination extremely seriously, so that anyone with a complaint comes forward so that all allegations can be fully investigated and any appropriate disciplinary action taken in line with the party's procedures. All of us have the absolute utmost respect for the House clerks, and any of us who've had dealings with them on the various select committees, as I have, know that they are experts in their field and they offer vital assistance and advice to everyone. But I know that everyone who works here, in whatever capacity, knows that they play a vital role in ensuring that our Parliament and our democracy thrives.
Leader of the House.
Well, I thank the Shadow Leader of the House for her remarks, and also am grateful to her for the part she played in the working group on setting up an independent complaints procedure. I think it was notable, Mr. Speaker, that there was unanimous support for establishing that independent complaints procedure that I think the whole House can be very pleased about. In regard to her specific questions, she asks whether I'm aware of specific formal complaints. It was not in the terms of reference of the working group, and in fact it was specifically excluded from the terms of reference of the working group to consider specific complaints. In my role as Leader of the Commons, I have had a number of people come forward to me, and I have sought to deal as I can, wherever possible, with complaints that have been brought to me, but I don't propose to discuss any specific allegations in the Chamber. She asks about a review of the respect policy for House staff, and I can say to her that reading from the letter of the Clerk of the House to House staff today, he says, there are unresolved issues over bullying and harassment, including sexual harassment, which need to be addressed. And the Clerk of the House goes on to say that we will revisit and renew the respect policy. She asks whether the House Authorities Trades Union representative will be invited to join the steering group, and I can assure her that that, I believe, has already happened. He has been invited to join the steering group. And she asks when will the finalised procedures be finished. We have set an aspiration at the first meeting of the steering group last week that the bulk of it is done within 3 months, and there will be a final vote in this House on changes necessary to standing orders and to adopt the behaviour code, and we certainly expect and hope that that will be before the House rises for summer recess.
James Duddridge.
Is it appropriate for Mr. Speaker to remain in his place where there are allegations against him which he is trying to suppress using taxpayer-funded money through sending out letters through Speaker's Council?
Shame on you. The Leader of the House.
I think it's absolutely vital that all colleagues join together in supporting the efforts being made by this House to stamp out all bullying and harassment wherever we see it, and to ensure that everybody will be treated in the future with the respect and dignity that they deserve.
Pete Wishart.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Can I heartily congratulate the Honourable Lady for securing this very important, urgent question. She, like me, will find some of the issues that have been raised by BBC News Night over the weekend depressingly familiar, and something that comes as little surprise to any of us who have listened to the evidence that we secured as part of the harassment working group. It was only really a matter of time that issues such as this would emerge, and it's quite surprising it's been so short. This endemic culture is something that has to be tackled, and I very much support the Leader of the House's call for an independent inquiry, and perhaps you could talk just a little bit how she says this will be conducted. Does the Leader of the House agree that historical allegations must be considered? And does she support the view that we would be letting down victims past and present if we failed to respond to such allegations? Does she agree that this is all just part of the normalisation of bullying and harassment that continues to poison our politics, amplified by this archaic environment of grandeur and subservience in which we conduct our roles as members of Parliament? And lastly, will she ensure that all members, whether they work for this House or whether they work for members of Parliament, all members of staff are covered by the new behaviour code and have access to the new complaints procedure as quickly as possible?
Leader of the House.
Well, first I'd like to pay tribute to the Honourable Gentleman for his part in the working group. He was assiduously attending meetings and taking a full part in the work, and I'm grateful to him for his contribution. He asks how will an independent inquiry be conducted. Obviously, my intention is to make this proposal to the House Commission. It will be a matter for the Commission to agree whether to do that or not. The House Commission is made up of a number of members from across the House, including one from his own party. However, I would like to see it carried out by an independent individual who can hear from past and current members of the staff of the House, so that that person can be free of any input from either employers or indeed parliamentarians, and people can feel they can come forward in confidence. I completely agree with him. It would be letting people down if we fail to deal with this, and it's absolutely vital that those who have past allegations, who feel that the time has passed for them to be dealt with seriously, can achieve some closure by being able to come forward and be heard in that way. And I also do agree with him that it is demeaning to this House and to all of us if we fail to get a grip on it, and that's why this House has shown such commitment to setting up an independent complaints and grievance policy, which is the right way forward.
Michael Fabricant.
I very much welcome the Leader's statement. And does she agree with me that sometimes the accused can be victims too? And that's why it is so important that we have an independent inquiry. But would she also agree with me that the House of Commons Commission would not be an independent judge or jury, and indeed would not be seen to be as such, simply because of the very membership of that commission, and that it does need to be an independent individual or group of individuals?
The Leader of the House.
Well, of course, my honourable friend raises an important point, and during the working group evidence sessions, we were very conscious that it's important to protect both complainants who are at the heart of the independent complaints procedure, but also the alleged perpetrator. It is important that justice is seen to be done and that all parties are properly supported. He's also right to say that an inquiry led by the House Commission couldn't be independent, which is why my recommendation to the House Commission will be that it should be an independently led inquiry into allegations of bullying.
Alison McGovern.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I say to the Leader of the House that when she chooses, as she has done today, to focus on the thoroughness and decency of the process of dealing with these issues, she will get support from right across this House. And she has mentioned several times the involvement of trade union representatives. So would she just join me in asserting that it is right that members of our staff and members of staff of this House are members of trade unions if they choose to be, and that their representatives ought to be involved at every stage of these processes?
Leader of the House.
Well, the Honourable Lady gives me the opportunity to thank and pay tribute to the very good staff representatives who were on the working group. A representative from Unite, who is working as a researcher for a member of the Labour Party, the representative of MAPSA, the Members and Peers Staff Association, who works as a researcher for a member of the Conservative Party, and a representative of the NUJ, who works for the Scottish Nationalists here. They all made a great contribution and I think are to be commended for their efforts.
Andrew Bridgen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does my right honourable friend agree? Unfortunately, the system we've got at the moment is that House of Commons staff, A, believe that if they make a complaint about bullying and harassment, it won't be taken seriously, and secondly, and perhaps more insidiously, believe that it will be seriously detrimental to their future career. I welcome the fact that we're going to have an independent investigation into the allegations we heard on Newsnight. When will that start and when will it complete?
The Leader of the House.
The House Commission meets next Monday. I will be making that recommendation there, and then that will start as soon as possible.
Alistair Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The House is exceptionally well served by the clerk staff. I think that's a matter of common accord. So surely I hope it goes without saying that these complaints require to be investigated with rigour in a comprehensive way and independently. Mr. Speaker, when you and I first entered the House was almost entirely self-regulating. The position today is very, very different, but that change has come in a way that is piecemeal. What surely now is required is a proper, comprehensive look again at the question of parliamentary privilege and self-regulation. So can I say, in welcoming the short independent inquiry that the leader seeks to establish, that once that is done, she should apply her mind to revisiting the work of the joint committee set up in 1998 to look at the question of the extent and definition of parliamentary privilege.
The Leader of the House.
I think the right honourable gentleman makes a very interesting observation, and I will certainly look at it.
Dr. Matthew Offord.
Does the Leader of the House agree with me that every single individual complaint made against a member actually reflects badly on each and every one of us in this place? And given the Newsnight allegation that the policy simply was not up to scratch and certainly was something that we decided amongst ourselves, does she agree with me that we not only need an independent investigation, but we also need an external independent body to establish our policy going forward?
Leader of the House.
Well, I hope I can reassure my honourable friend that the independent grievance policy that we are in the process of establishing will ensure that the culture in this place changes to the benefit of all who work here. But I would also just like to say at this point that many honourable members are very troubled by these allegations. It is, as ever, a small minority of people who behave badly, and he is right to point out that it demeans all of us when a few of us behave badly.
Mr. Barry Sherman.
Mr. Speaker, having been in the House quite a long time, I recall in the early days that the warnings to particularly young women in this House was very often not just a certain small group of members of Parliament, but some senior clerks who were known to be bullies. And as chair of the anti-bullying group of MPs for some years, I've been fighting everyone's corner in that respect. And I have to say, in recent years, I've never known a speaker as strong in terms of reforming that particular part of our lives. But can I urge her to get on with this quickly? We want justice to be seen and to be done. But I also want this committee to know there are only a tiny minority of members of this House have used this almost like a new kind of McCarthyism, to name someone, that someone is put into purdah on that side or this side with no redress, dreadful things happening to their families, and one doesn't even know what happens to the families and the members who are accused. There is a danger of a kind of political McCarthyism that we've also got to stamp out in this place.
So again, I would remind the honourable gentleman that the independent complaints procedure will be exactly that. It will be independent, it will be confidential, so that complainants who very often don't want to come forward for fear of being having to then deal with the person they're accusing, so they will come forward in confidence. The alleged perpetrator will also be able to have their side of the story heard in confidence. There will therefore be natural justice rules applied to the entire process, but there will also be very serious sanctions for wrongdoing. I genuinely believe that this work will change the culture in Parliament. It will take us to a new stage where people can come forward, and it will make people think twice about some of their attitudes.
Philip Hollowbone.
There may be problems with definition. Lots of these cases won't have been investigated, and often at best the details will be sketchy at this stage. But can the Leader of the House give the House an indication of the scale of this issue? How many cases of abuse of House or members' staff have been brought to her attention in her recent dealings with this issue?
I don't really think I can give my honourable friend an idea of the scale of the problem. I think, like all honourable members, different cases appear in the media, and it is very difficult to understand exactly the enormity and range of the problem. But suffice to say that going forward, I think across this House we're determined to see change for the better.
Chris Leslie.
The Leader of the House's emphasis that she's placed on due process and principles of justice. Complainants have to be taken seriously, but then the person who is being complained against also has rights, and the case should be heard on the basis of evidence. I think that is really important in this whole process. Could she also say a word about the Independent Commissioner for Parliamentary Standards that we currently have, who of course hears complaints about honourable members, can then put those to the Parliamentary Standards and Privileges Committee? That is also a route that I think needs to be somehow incorporated into the new process that she's envisaging.
Well, the honourable gentleman is exactly right, and indeed that is a part of the process. So very specifically, an independent complaint is heard in confidence, and then if there is a finding against the alleged perpetrator, that would then, in the case of a Member of Parliament being complained about, go to the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards, who would either carry out an appeal and look at the evidence again, or find against the member, or find that there was no cause to answer, and then she will have expanded sanctions at a lower level, or indeed she will pass it on to the Committee for Standards for them to consider, including recommending suspension to this House, which could lead to the recall of Parliament, of Members of Parliament Act of 2015 being invoked.
Dr. Julian Lewis.
Does the Leader of the House agree that any member of staff who feels that he or she has been bullied must have an absolute guarantee that their career will not suffer in any way if they make a complaint? And if they have that guarantee, does she agree that the reputation of members of Parliament should not be sullied by accusations that they are bullies unless a complaint against them has actually been made?
Yes, I think my honourable friend sums it up very well. It's vital that complainants are protected so they can come forward in confidence and not be further victimised. But it's also essential that people who are complained about have the opportunity to put their side of the story and to receive proper justice.
Lucy Powell.
Mr Speaker. And can I commend the Leader of the House and her counterparts, and indeed you as well, Mr Speaker, on your response to these issues so far. Does the Leader of the House agree with me that this is a moment for each and every one of us to reflect on our behaviour and to constantly reflect on our behaviour? Because it's not about what we judge to deem the appropriate behaviour, but how we make others feel is the critical issue. And that's why the independent nature of her proposals is so critical, because this has to be without political fear or favour or political campaigns against opponents or anybody else, so that people can come forward in that regard.
Yes, she's exactly right. The power dynamic, the idea that how you behave is not necessarily how you are seen to behave, is incredibly important in this. And certainly in the working group evidence, we took a lot of witness statements about exactly that, and it's vital that we take that into account.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Due process sometimes takes a very long time. Could I ask the Leader of the House to ensure that due process should be as speedy as possible in the interests of everyone?
I completely agree with my honourable friend, and I think we're quite proud that we moved very quickly with the independent complaints procedure, but at the same time we're doing a thorough job, and that is our plan.
John Mann.
The industrial tribunal has to be registered under the Ministry of Justice. In the interest of transparency, will the Leader of the House publish all industrial tribunal applications that have been registered against members of Parliament or indeed against the House of Commons?
I don't believe that that would be a matter for me, but I will certainly look into it.
Stella Creasy.
Mr Speaker, can I put on record my support for the work that the Leader of the House and the Speaker and all the members of the Workers' Group have been doing since November on this issue? And does she agree with me that we need to take the politics out of this altogether? If people are to have confidence that we truly are listening, that victims will be believed and that we will have a proper process, then it's time for professionals, not the press or political expediency, to lead this process.
Yes, I completely agree with the Honourable Lady. The independence is absolutely vital.
Paul Farrelly.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I can assure you I've got great respect for all staff I work with. But I was also the guinea pig in 2012 after a difficult phone hacking report for the original respect policy. I was flayed by selective leaking then, 6 years ago, and it's just happened again now. So I would ask the Leader of the House and honourable members, before they jump to judgment after what was a very one-sided selective BBC broadcast, that they approach the cases that have been raised in a more balanced way, and that they also consider the reasons why the original respect policy was scrapped in the first place as not fit for purpose, that they also give consideration to the disparity of support of MPs who are complained against, especially when complainants have the backing of the resourceful and very well-resourced First Division Association in particular. And perhaps, finally, Mr Speaker, I might say, ask the House to consider why historical old allegations like this are being selectively recycled now, and by whom, because whatever is at play, this is not a game for reputations or families.
The House.
Well, what I would say to the honourable gentleman is that the advantage of an independent complaints procedure is that it exists and will exist for people to be able to come forward with confidence and with confidentiality. And what that means is they at long last do have somewhere they can go and make their complaint without just going straight to the press, which, as he raises, has caused some difficulties.
Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The working group report recommends training by the end of this Parliament. Clearly, that's inappropriate. Will the Leader bring that forward to ensure that every member and manager has face-to-face